Bob Holt joining us from the Democrat-Gazette. Big shot, yeah.
I'd say so.
Appreciate his time here on a Thursday. Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing well.
We're great. Waiting for the baseball team to arrive so we can fly out to Texas A&M. At the post-game press conference yesterday after another win over Arkansas State and another blowout over an in-state team, it's not that Dave Van Horn sounded disinterested at all, but he said he just wanted to get by this thing and get right to conference play. And, they played well. It's not like Arkansas was disinterested, but you could tell by Dave's voice yesterday he just wants to get past this midweek stuff.
Well, yeah, there's kind of Tom Murphy covered yesterday. I covered the day before. But, yeah, it's kind of cold, nasty day, and I think the games were both 3.5 hours. Obviously you like, if you're Arkansas or anybody, you like to score runs, but when it's 10-1 and 10-3 and there's a lot of walks and, you make a lot of pitching changes, that it tends to make the games go longer. So, yeah, I think, obviously it's all about the conference. I mean, the midweek games are important because you're getting younger players, especially some pitchers. They're not necessarily all young, but you're getting your pitchers that don't work on the weekends some work, and maybe seeing if some guys can help you on the weekends, like Zach Morris. The way he pitched the week before against UAPB, that got him a look against LSU, and he pitched well. And maybe some of these other guys, McIntyre's hadn't pitched since 2020, and he's gotten 2 starts now in midweek. You can see Dylan Leach, having some home runs and having some good games. So the midweek games have a place, but yeah, I think when you're beating somebody 10-1 and 10-3, you just kind of want to get through those games probably.
Well, they've outscored the in-state schools 78-21, and that goes along with really every other sport, every other team on campus that's played any other in-state school. They've kind of blown them all out. And here it was. It's like, what happens if they lose to them? Well, Arkansas lost the first game they've ever played against an in-state team, or for a long time, that in 2019. And since then, they've just been beaten. I mean, honestly, kind of beaten the bejesus out of them.
Yeah, that first game against ULR, 17-7, and that not take anything away from ULR. That was a huge win for that program, and I covered that game, and you could almost hear the voice of Frank Burrell saying, "This is why you don't play these teams, Dave." But Dave was the guy that really pushed for it because, and he talked about this the other day. It's just hard to get teams to travel, later in the season during the week. And Arkansas obviously don't want to have to travel. I mean, they've had a home and home with Missouri State before. I think this year they're just playing Missouri State over here. But you can get the in-state teams will travel because, one, it's not, and Jonesboro's a fairly long trip. I think it's about a 6-hour drive. But but the in-state teams, they really want to play Arkansas, so they're willing to do it. And of course, Arkansas's, I guess, will be a home game next Tuesday when they play UCA, but obviously that's just a 30-minute drive for UCA or 20 minutes or whatever to North Little Rock. So it's just good. It kind of, there's more interest if Arkansas is playing, Arkansas State instead of, Troy or some other Sun Belt team if they're playing UALR. So at some point, I think Arkansas has won 13 straight, not since losing to UALR, 13 straight over in-state teams. At some point, they'll lose to another in-state team, either that team will play real well or Arkansas will have an off night or something. But I think what it's showing is that, the world isn't going to come to an end. One, if Arkansas plays these teams, and even if they happen to lose to them like they did to UALR, most of the time Arkansas is going to dominate these teams as they should because, not to knock them, but Arkansas is, a top 5 program, and they should be beating these teams on a regular basis.
That they should, Bob. And now that Anthony, switching sports here, going to basketball real quick. Now that Anthony Black is signed and your freshman class is now officially official. We talked last segment about Oscar Tshiebwe coming back to Kentucky. Reported that he's going to get NIL deals of 7 figures. Some reports up to $2.5 million in NIL deals in this next calendar year. Are any of these 6 freshmen coming in this class, do you think will be one of the first 7-figured college athletes in the natural state?
Man, I have no idea. I don't really know what they keep the NIL deals pretty private as far as I know. It would not surprise me if somebody like Nick Smith had a pretty good NIL deal, or some of the other guys for that matter, but especially a local player, an in-state player like him that was so highly recruited. But think about Oscar Tshiebwe. He was not. I don't think he was going to be a high draft pick. I think if he was, he would have left for the draft.
Mm-hmm.
But as good a college player as he is, he's just not. He's not listed as a lottery pick. Maybe not even a first-round pick. So it makes a lot of sense for him to come back. That's one thing I think it's really good about NIL for the players is that if you're going to be a first-round pick, you probably should leave. If you're going to be a lottery pick, I think that's a no-brainer because whatever NIL can pay you, you're going to make more money in the NBA, I would think. But $2.5 million, lottery picks are going to get more than that over a 3 or 4 year period. But I think it's good for a guy who says, well, I don't know if I'm going to be a first-round pick or even drafted at all, but I know I can make some money, whether it's in the G League or playing overseas or whatever the case might be. But now he can say, well, if I come back, I know I can make good money in NIL, and I can probably make as much as I could make in the G League or more, maybe more, and that's why I don't have to go overseas in what it seems to be an increasingly dangerous world outside the U.S. So I think that's a nice option to have, and it's probably a no-brainer for a guy like, Tshiebwe to come back for that kind of money. And I would expect these Arkansas athletes, whatever the sport might be, to make increasing money. But I honestly, I don't know anybody's NIL deal, from a specific standpoint.
Drew, there's a dissonance with two announcements from players that were at Kentucky. And I know this isn't a Kentucky show, but we focus on college sports. You have the National Player of the Year in Tshiebwe announcing, I'm not going to go into the draft, I'm going to come back to Kentucky. And maybe the most talented kid on the Kentucky team, Shaden Sharp, who never even saw the floor. Mm-hmm. He never played a game, never played a single minute for Kentucky, sat the bench the entire season. Cal was asked tons of questions about him. He said he's staying in the draft, and ESPN's got him ranked 6th. He's a surefire lottery pick, man. He didn't even play a minute, and here's the National Player of the Year. He's not good enough for the first round.
Yeah, and that's why it is so important. And that's why I have to drive my point home so much that age and ceiling truly is the real factor. And Rob, I want to bring you into this discussion as well. Does it almost feel like nowadays when you're talking about draft lotteries and how guys' games translate from high school, collegiate, all the way up to the National Basketball Association, that it almost doesn't matter what you did in college? The fact, all that matters is that you're 19, right? Is that you're draft eligible? Why does it feel that way? And should it be that way, that regardless of what a guy does at the collegiate level, he can still be looked at as a lottery pick because he just has, God-given talent and the right body size, and scouts project his ceiling to be as high as they do?
Yeah, it seems like it's much more that way in the NBA. It's almost like, the older you get, he's over the hill or something. It's like, I'll just use Daniel Gafford as an example. He was a highly recruited guy, and I think he was a 4-star, but I don't think anybody had him being a first-round pick as a freshman. And, of course, he didn't go in the draft as a freshman, but the way Daniel came on, late in the year especially, he was so athletic, the way he ran the floor for a big guy. And there was definitely buzz that he was going to be probably a late first-round pick if he had come out. And I was kind of surprised he didn't even test the water, but I'll give him credit for coming back, and that was great for Arkansas basketball, and I'm sure he improved some, but he went from being a guy that was projected possibly to be a first round pick. We'll never know for sure. And if he'd worked out, they would have found some holes in his game. But he ended up being, I haven't looked this up, but I think he was picked about 38. Mm-hmm. So kind of an early second-round pick, and he's done very well in the NBA, playing for the Wizards, and he's going to make a lot of money.
Oh, they love him in Washington.
Yeah, he's going to, barring injury, Daniel Gafford's going to have a very long, successful NBA career. And, I think he probably would have been. This is just my speculation. I think he would have been a higher pick if he'd come out after his freshman year. And, I guess selfishly, I'm glad he did because he was a fun guy to cover, and he made that Arkansas team a lot more interesting. And but yeah, you're right. It's almost, and that's where if you're Jaylin Williams, you kind of got to wonder. He's 19. I think he turns 20 sometime late spring or early summer. And Jaylin had a great year, and he's being projected. I've seen him anywhere from maybe an early to a late second-round pick, not a first-round pick. But, if people say, well, gee, why is he even considering it? Well, it's because next year maybe his stock drops because, oh, my God, he's 20. He's going to be 21 by the time next season starts. It seems crazy because, of course, I grew up in an era when, Larry Bird was, picked. Of course, Magic Johnson was the exception at that time in '79, coming out as a sophomore. Sidney Moncrief. These guys were men. I mean, they were 20, 21, 22, maybe 23 in some cases when they went into the league. And really, if you think about it, if you look at the MLB draft, Bill can probably speak to this better than I can, but I don't know the exact numbers, but I think you see a lot more college players drafted high now because they're more of a proven commodity than the high school players. I mean, the high school players don't have a lot of talent, a lot of upside, but you're a little more sure what you're getting when you're drafting a guy who's 20 or 21 who's pitched for 3 years in the SEC or the Big 12 or whatever than you are a high school kid. And maybe, and you're wondering about the competition he's gone against. And so, and in the NFL, obviously, one of the reasons that the NFL has kept that rule that, you got to play at least 3 years, or at least your class. You can't come out before your class. It's 3 years, is because the NFL doesn't want 19-year-old kids going into the NFL and getting the crap beat out of them. They want people who are 21 or 20 at least, and especially with linemen, they probably want older guys. They want guys that are physically matured. But in the NBA, you're right. It just seems like it's all based on ceiling and potential. And if you're Kobe, Bryant or something, that works great. But what about Kwame Brown? I mean, people might say, "Who's that?" Well, he was the number 1 draft pick a few years ago, and he didn't do squat that I remember. And he's kind of the poster child for picking guys who haven't done anything. But I think if they see, I think one of the reasons that they like having they at least like having these guys play 1 year in college to see what they do at the college level, kind of how they handle that. But it seems like in the NBA more than anything, it's like the younger the better. And I get that, but it's almost like, well, by the time that guy really hits his stride, he's a free agent, But that's definitely,
right.
it seems like in the NBA, younger's better, where you don't see that as much in Major League Baseball and the NFL. And I really don't follow the NHL well enough to know about that. I know they draft a lot of young guys in the NHL for sure, too.
Yeah, but they're allowed to play college hockey, and that's what junior hockey's for, too. Hey, Bob, we got to run. Appreciate you. Thank you.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs, sports info, and odds. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's odds for the Masters Championship and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so join today. Learn why everyone is saying BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on popular sports and games. BetOnline, where the game starts.